main room. We are recording a real life podcast today. And so I'm going to let you kind of hear the setup and kind of how it's going to go. And then I'll hit record and then we'll go for it. So and I'll introduce myself and my guests once I get going. Please feel free to put any questions you have for our guests or about the topic of monetizing online events in general in the chat. And we will have 10 minutes at the end where we will get to those. And I'll be having some help in that front by our trusty room parent, Laura. Thank you for that. All right, y'all. Let's do this thing. That's interesting. Okay, I'm already recording. It's recording. I should have, the other day I had the ability to record on my end as well, and I am not seeing that. So, okay, all right, we'll count on getting the audio and the video later. Okay, all right. Hello, and welcome to the Insight Events podcast by SwapCard. I'm your host, Megan Powers with Powers of Marketing. We provide strategic communication, consulting, and training for small to medium-sized businesses, a lot of them in the meetings and events space, which will come as no surprise to those of you listening or watching. I want to let you know if you have some feedback for us, our Twitter account is @TheEventProfs. Somebody really smart snagged that a long time ago, and then we were able to use it for the show. So I also want to mention, I don't know if any of you have attended the Evolve conference sessions, but there's another one coming up on September 29th. It'll be hosted by the amazing Kiki L'Italien, and she has also been a guest on this podcast. So that's pretty exciting. All right, we're talking monetizing online events, and truly, this is a hot topic right now because everyone knows we've gone online, but has anybody made any money from it? So Scott and Liz here today are two wonderful people who have been in the industry for a while, and I'll read their bios in a sec, who offered to be on. Welcome, Scott and Liz.
Thanks, Megan.
Thank you.
All right, and I will drop a link to that Evolve session in the chat for everyone, and it'll also be in the show notes. Okay, our guest, Liz King Caruso, is an event specialist, consultant, and speaker who is passionate about impactful, successful, and fun events. Liz launched Liz King Events while still running events full-time for Columbia University and quickly became a thought leader and influencer amongst her peers after voraciously sharing content on best practices. Liz works with thought leaders like Ramit Sethi, Microsoft, SeatGeek, Teamworthy Ventures, Ramon Ray, and many others to host strategic conferences and events that engage their audience, build their brand, and sell their products and services. And I can attest to that because I knew who she was from Tuxie Talk, so that's awesome. Scott Oser, president of Scott Oser Associates. Scott has more than 20 years of membership, marketing, and sales experience. Since launching his firm over 15 years ago, he's been fortunate to work with some incredible trade and individual membership associations. Throughout his career, Scott has excelled in developing, implementing, and analyzing multi-channel membership, marketing, and sales programs. Recently, he has succeeded in helping a number of event planners transition their exhibitors and sponsorship programs from in-person to virtual. Okay, all right. I want to first talk about how you helped your clients shift to online. I'm going to ask you both, for the events that you've worked on that were monetized, did you help them shift to online from what was supposed to be in person or from scratch as an online event? Let's start with you, Liz.
We've done both. We have moved clients who were supposed to have an in-person event and shifted it to virtual given COVID. And then we also have clients who kind of took advantage of the situation and launched new virtual events that they were not necessarily planning to do in person, but now they're doing them online.
Okay. All right. And okay. all right, we'll get to the how and what and all that other stuff.
Okay.
I don't want to jump. I was about to jump ahead on my own questions. Scott, what about you?
Well, with the couple of clients that I've been working for, actually one is having their virtual meeting right now as we speak. It's ongoing. So I'm doing a little bit of double duty today. But most of the events that I worked on the most closely were switching virtual, in-person events to virtual. So they were already scheduled to be held in person. And so we had to transition them over to a virtual event.
Okay, and I guess we can, when we get to the how, we'll learn if there's any friction going on there. All right, Liz. So you have clients who've been able to charge a high ticket price for their online events. Can you share how it was determined, what you would charge, and kind of how that all went?
Sure. So one of our clients that has is charging a good amount for her money, for her virtual event. This was one that it was an in-person event originally. So they've worked over the past 7 years of having their conference. They've worked really hard to get the ticket price to $1,500 for a 2-day summit, which is, not the, top of the, it's not the most expensive, but, it's a decent price. When you move to virtual, everyone is dropping their prices. And it really doesn't make any sense to me. The content is still the content. Yes, the change of what we pay for is different. We're not renting venues and stuff, but people are not purchasing tickets because you have event costs. They're purchasing tickets because they want to access the content. And so this was one client who came to me and said, like, should we be charging $500? Should we be charging $600? Should we be doing it free? And there are so many different models. But in this case, I really felt like the client had worked really hard to build their brand and to get that ticket price to where it was, and we didn't want to change that. So what we ended up doing in that particular scenario was adding value. So the price is still $1,500 for the virtual event. There is now the option to pay $125 a month as compared to paying it all in one price. And then it's a year-round membership. So it also comes with a call once a month with speakers. And then, so you get the summit, you get the calls, and then you also get recordings of all the things that you've missed. And then there's an online community. So basically what we did is build the value around the ticket. We've already sold almost 200 tickets in the 2 weeks that we've launched. So the price is not the only thing that people are making their decision based on. You still have to provide, top best-in-class speakers, a meaningful, valuable experience. And what we did was we kind of added value as compared to taking down the price.
I love that. Yeah, I'm hearing a lot about this membership-based kind of scenario that organizations are doing. There's one, Atomic, they're based in the UK. This has actually been their model. You pay for the membership and you get the conference. So,
right.
And yeah, and then this year it had to go online. And then next year the online was so successful that they decided they're going to do a blend of the two next year. So that's awesome. So Scott, ticket registration, as she just talked about, that's one way to monetize, but we can't forget about the sponsorship and exhibitor side of things. How have you helped your clients with this piece for their online events?
Well, we made a decision early on with exhibitors and sponsors for the 2 events that I was working most closely with to not drop prices from when they went from in-person to virtual. As I know we're not talking the exact same thing as attendance, but as Liz mentioned, it's about value, right? It's not about, all right, and I've had a couple of, and we'll get into this a little bit more later. I had a couple of people say to me, why are the prices the same? Your costs are lower. And my reaction is always, it's not about our cost. We're still delivering the same audience to you. We're still delivering the same value to you. So your cost is not going down just because we don't have to buy coffee at $500 a gallon. That's not what we're talking about here. But so what we really did was we made that decision very early on that the pricing for the sponsors and the exhibitors were going to be the same. But what we did differently was we added, as Liz was saying, and I love her model of making it sort of the membership-ish model, I'll call it that, where you got the event lasted a lot longer. And that's what we're trying to do for the sponsors and the exhibitors in both cases. It's not just about the event. It's not just about the 3 days that the event was going on. It was about what you could do outside of the event to reach different people above and beyond the registrants and reach people for longer above and beyond those 3 days. So we decided to keep the price the same, but we also enhanced the value so that way they would get more for the same price.
I love that. Yeah, the IDSA Foundation, well, ID Week is the conference. Obviously, it's gone online, and that was something that struck me when I was looking at the price for the booth package. They're still calling it a booth package, which I think is kind of funny. But it included, you get year-round access to this platform. So I think that's at the heart of what everyone should be thinking about around a lot of this, is about creating community around it.
Yeah, Megan, I think it's really funny how you sort of say they're still calling it a booth. Most people that I have seen are still calling it a booth. And to me, we need to figure out something different. We had to flip ours so quick that we called it a booth too, right? We actually had 2 levels of booths, even though there is no regular booth. There's not a 10 by 10, there's not a 20 by 20, there's not a 400 by 400. There's this virtual thing, but we need to figure out what it is, but there doesn't seem to be any consistency. So everybody's just going to booth. And in our case, we were fortunate that most of the commitments for the events, because it was so close, had already been made. So people had bought booths. So I had to then just flip them from a in-person booth to a virtual booth. But I laugh about that too. I'm like, here, you want a booth? And they're like, there's no booth. And I'm like, I know there's no booth, but let's just keep calling it a booth for now because we got nothing else.
Right. Or in Europe, it's a stand. I like that. All right. So, and I love that questions are coming in for Liz about her event. So we can talk about it more if you want to expand on what people are asking when your event was. And it sounded like it hasn't happened yet, right, Liz?
No, it'll be mid-November.
Okay.
So a few months from now.
Awesome. And then I neglected to mention this at the beginning of the podcast recording, but we are doing this live at a conference called The Age of Conversation. And so while most of these sessions will definitely be built around conversation, and we're going to try to cover questions throughout, we will save time at the end to allow the participants to ask away from these 2 great guests. So, all right, awesome. So, Liz, can you share anything unique that you've helped clients with in terms of sponsorship and exhibiting?
Well, so again, I think it's all about that value. That's my new favorite word. We've always tried to do that. But the truth is, your sponsors have set goals. And whenever we're building their sponsorship packages, that's the first question. What are you trying to achieve? And it's really about looking outside of the box, and the box being the 10 by 10 or the 20 by 20 booth. And I completely agree with what Scott's saying. We have to get away from that word. Really what it is about understanding what their goals are. So for example, the other event that I mentioned where they started a new event that's in a virtual platform, they ended up making all of their revenue from sponsorships and made it a free event. So they were able to get 2,500 people to sign up to participate. We actually had almost 2,000 participate live, which are ridiculous numbers. Usually you get a lot higher drop off for free events and virtual. And then in addition to that, they were able to sell $15,000, $25,000 sponsorships. And the reason was because the sponsors wanted visibility. This is why I think that hybrid events are going to help us get back to in-person, and they're never going away, because our sponsors are actually going to see that there's amazing value with virtual that they were not getting in person. And I think it's going to change what our physical events look like as well. So we've really helped to think about how our sponsors can achieve what they want and just completely throw away what they were getting before and reimagine it in a virtual environment. So for example, we have another client who that sponsor really just wants, one of their sponsors really just wants an intimate gathering of the top leads. They don't necessarily care to be in front of 5 billion people. They want 50 people who are going to purchase a sizable product from them. So we've created, and I saw someone in the comments say something similar to this. We've created kind of an event, a forum just for them. It's a sub event of the actual conference. They're able to get those leads, and they're happier than ever. So I think we're going to see these hybrid components lasting forever. I don't think this virtual is going away. The key is now sponsors really are going to be asking for that data, which I think event organizers have been kind of skirting around. Now you can see exactly how many minutes and seconds did someone watch your content. This stuff is stuff you weren't able to really capture easily at a trade show booth. So we need to up our game and really make sure we're delivering that value to our sponsors.
Yeah, for sure. It's a little bit harder to track that traffic. And you're relying also on the exhibitors to, as an event organizer, you're relying on the exhibitors to give you that data back. How many people did you talk to? How many sales did you convert? All of that kind of stuff. And yeah, I mean, ideally, it's really surprised me throughout all this how difficult people are really, that digital is not new. Right. So why it's been such a shock is a little bit surprising to me. But the challenge, I think, with the hybrid thing and the kind of the debate I've been seeing online a little bit is that, and this goes to what you said, Scott, that it actually, the costs of the venue and the food are being offset by other costs, by other technical costs, potentially. When you go hybrid, then you essentially have two teams. You can't have the same people managing your in-person event that you have managing your online experience. It has to be a different set of people. And so everyone's going to have to account for that in their budgets. Event organizers are going to have to understand that there's going to be an added cost to that, but the value should go up. And we will talk about, we will get to the likeliness of people wanting to experience something more because they've actually paid for it. We'll get to that here in a minute. So Scott, what do you think is the number one barrier that event organizers need to get over to make their online events profitable?
I think that the biggest barrier that they have to get over is that they have to recreate what they did in person virtually. That it has to be the same number of sessions, they have to have the same type of exhibit hall, they have to have it for the same number of days, they have to have the same exact, as much as they can replicate the same exact event virtually as they do in person. And I had that conversation, I've heard it a lot, but I also directly had it with my two clients that I'm working on these events with, because they both, these guys, these organizations actually both have education committees. And when they went to the education committee, the first thing the education committee said was, okay, well, now that it's virtual, we can just keep it the same exact days, right? We don't even have to shift the dates. We're going to do it exactly when it was scheduled to be in person. We're going to have the same number of sessions. We're going to have the live keynotes. We're going to do everything the same. The reality is that the virtual actually gives you a lot more flexibility. And I don't want to take too much time into, do you do the event as 3 days, full days, half days? Do you break it up and do a half day, 1 day a week for whatever? We could talk about that as a whole different conversation. But I think that is a big barrier, is just getting them outside of their heads as to, we have to do it the same. And Megan, your other question, which you asked Liz, was, what have you given your sponsors and exhibitors? I think I've given them a headache, because I'm forcing them to think differently than they ever have before. First of all, I've got to tell them how this virtual event's going to work, because many of them have not experienced it. And then I've got to help them understand how they can utilize the virtual event to get the value that they're looking for. And so some of them, it just blows their heads up. I mean, I'm sure we've all seen the conversation with some organizations, potential sponsors and exhibitors. It doesn't care. You could offer them the moon. You could offer them signed contracts, but someone above the people that make the decision to exhibitor sponsor has said, no virtual. We're just not doing virtual. We don't know what we're doing with virtual, but we're not doing it. And so you have to overcome all of that. But I think that the event organizer, first of all, has to figure out what this event's going to look like before you can even talk to sponsors and exhibitors.
Yeah, Liz, have you experienced that?
Absolutely. I have clients, for example, telling their sponsors before we've been able to get involved in the conversation, your logo will be behind. And I'm like, where behind? Are you going to do backdrops? Are you going to do green screens? Like, people have not thought about it because they're literally just talking with the same language they would use for an in-person event. And I have absolutely seen that across the industry, that, you're just going to forget about all the benefits that virtual gives us that we don't have with in-person events. We're just going to take it and just move it online and hope that it works really well. And the problem is, the truth of the matter is, there's not a lot of great platforms out there in the first place to really make that happen and to create an engaging environment. And so a lot of the stuff that you would have had in an in-person, you don't necessarily have in a virtual, like the serendipitous one-on-one connections. Well, when you lose that part, you lose a huge piece of your event. So if you're not thinking creatively about how to add that back in or how to change things, you end up having a pretty bad experience when you just take what you were doing in person and shove it into whatever virtual platform you've chosen.
No, for sure. Well, and I do think there are some platforms that have the ability to connect one-on-one. And actually, I've experienced that. Like I made a connection with somebody who wanted to set up a meeting with me, and when we got on the Zoom, he didn't even know why. He liked, I had been a speaker, and I liked my vibe or whatever. And so he's like, let's just talk. And so we just talked about the industry and the state of things, and who knows, maybe somewhere down the line. But you don't know, but I probably wouldn't have had that same interaction with him face to face. It was because of this online environment that, when done well, you're right, there's not a ton of options out there, but I think they're all improving. Those who were ready for this, maybe not 100%, but those who were more ready, I have an advantage, I think, over those that weren't even considering it, and then just kind of like quickly tried to throw development together, and they were like, blah. So, all right, cool. So I want to talk about registration and attendance. I alluded to this earlier. The free versus paid in terms of the likeliness of attendees to show up, and then is there a higher quality of attendee if they've paid to be there? So the first thing is, I know that some organizations have had like huge registration numbers, and then maybe they get like a 40, 50, 60% attendance rate if it was free. Now, the potential there, especially in a membership-based organization, if you're getting attendees who have never aren't a member or never attended your event before, there's potential there, right, for a sale, for adding them into your membership. And so I think initially the free thing was just because people were scared. Like, we have to go online and we're afraid that people aren't going to show up. So we're just going to make it free. I know I personally have, this is the 9th or 10th event that I've spoken at, virtual online event. Some were being charged for, some were pay what you can, whatnot. But I think those ones that I pay for, I'm personally more likely to show up. I mean, I think people are going to be more engaged. Scott, let's start with you. What do you think about this whole piece?
Well, let me just comment real quick, Megan, on what you were saying about why people were going free. I think that it was sort of a knee-jerk reaction, but it was also because they were afraid of being tone deaf, right? The economy dropped
That's
so
true.
fast.
That's fair. Yeah.
That people were just like, all right, how can we charge? And I don't completely agree with that. I mean, as you started in my bio, I do a lot of membership work too. And on the membership side of things, there was always the question of, do we ask people to renew? Should we be renewing memberships? My personal opinion is, of course you should be renewing memberships. You should help people a little bit if they need some help, but you can't, that's the lifeblood in many organizations. You can't just stop doing it because, and I'm not trying to, be cold-hearted here, but you've got to do it, because not everybody's impacted the same way. Yes, there are industries that have been hit a lot harder than others. But I think that free versus paid, I think that the organizations that truly struggle with that are the ones that aren't in a position of power. Liz, as you mentioned, the adding value, the doing that subscription model so that you have that unique experience of talking to the speakers for months after. There probably aren't many other events that are doing that. So should you charge for that? Absolutely, because there is a value. But it also has to be, to look at it from a slightly different direction, you have to have a strategy. If you can do what some organizations have done and increase your attendance by 2,000% and then charge because it's free, and then charge your sponsors and exhibitors more, or increase the revenue there, sure, go for it. But you've got to know that up front. You've got to be smart about it. It can't just be happenstance that you do that. So I think that both models could work, but I, again, will go back to saying that if you're not in a position of strength, if you're not offering something that's of value, people are going to go to even like your industry partners who are offering the same types of education that you are, or to competing organizations that are offering it for either the same or lesser price. I have a really good example of an event I know of that they dropped the price significantly when it went from in person to online. They offer a ton of CME. They just found out within the last 2 weeks, as their attendance numbers were struggling, that another organization is offering almost the same amount of CME they are for free. So guess what people are signing up for? Same industry, same type of education. Guess what they're signing up for? Because it's a similar event. There is nothing unique about the one that was charging, even though it was at a lower price, than the one that was offering it for free. So of course you're going to struggle.
Right, right. And actually that brings two quick points, and then I'll let Liz ring in. This event, there was a sponsor that stepped up. So there's sponsorship opportunity for attendee tickets, right? There's something that for people who are struggling. So that's an idea. But also, and I forgot my second point. Anyway, Liz, what do you think? Sorry.
Yeah, I absolutely think you can do either way. We've actually had success, and it does come down to your goals. I do agree that if you're paying for a ticket, obviously you're more likely to show up than if you're getting it for free. But I think also, you know, webinar culture from the past few years has killed the idea of just free on-demand content because you assume that you can just sign up. You don't even put it on your calendar. Then you wait for the recording. You never listen to the recording. It's just too much content. And I think this is where we have a unique opportunity as event organizers to, again, provide that extra value. And to me, that's all about the engagement. It's about those one-on-one connections. It's about what happens in the chat, all of that live stuff. So we've also had really good success with free for live access and paid for recording. So you don't get the recordings. You literally just show up and you get whatever you participate in, that's free. And it works really well. It gets people to show up and still be able to do that. And then we can make our money on the sponsorship side. So there's a lot of things that you can do. But I think at the end of the day, again, to Scott's point, it comes down to what are you trying to do? You're trying to make a humongous audience and then sell them into something else? Are you trying to provide value to a community? I saw a ticketing model that I really like, which was pay it forward. So there's one price and then you can pay a slightly more, and it offers another person the ability. So if you have enough money to buy a second ticket for someone, it's not full price, but you can then give someone who maybe is out of work or furloughed the opportunity to come for free. Love that model.
Yeah, they did that with this one. They did a buy one, get one. So, or give one. So you buy one, you could get one away, which I just think is amazing.
Yeah, and Megan, another model that I've seen work because it's virtual and there is no incremental cost is group purchasing, right? Like if you're able to share, you got to be careful, of course, because once it's digital and you give a code or whatever, you could share it with the world and then you got to worry about it. But that is another model, right? Where you could say, okay, I'm going to charge 5 times as much, but you can give this code to 100 people if you want. It doesn't matter to me, because once you pay for the tech, yeah, of course, if you need a bigger Zoom account or if you need more bandwidth or you need whatever it might be, but there's not really that incremental cost of, okay, we need a bigger room, we need more coffee, we need more food, we need more this stuff. So you can also grow attendance that way. But as we've been saying, it depends on what your strategy is and it has to be targeted.
Yeah, and it depends on who your speakers are too, because I mean, if you want a high quality, not that we're not high quality speakers, because obviously we are, and we're not getting paid for this, but you know what I mean? Like some of that speakers still need to get paid. So there's a lot of price things that people aren't taking into consideration, I think, that are still baked in to the event.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to keep interrupting you, but when I worked with both my clients, the first thing I said was, you guys have to blow up your P&L and start from scratch, because that's where it starts. You've got to know what your expenses are, and then you've got to make some estimates for revenue. And it's not the same. We all know it's not the same as in person. So you got to start from scratch. You can use some of that knowledge that you had before, like with speakers and things like that. Like if you're paying them, you should still probably pay them. You maybe pay them less, but you still got to do that, because otherwise, how do you really make decisions on anything? If you want to send them a swag bag, there's a cost to that. right? But without knowing what your P&L is, how do you make those decisions about what you can afford and what you can't afford?
Right. No question. And you pushing expenses for certain things like food over into other areas, it's important to be able to see where that money moves, to see if there's any left over, like, or whether you can be profitable, because monetizing and being profitable are two different things, are they not? I mean, you can charge, I guarantee the $20 ticket, everyone's getting so much more value. I mean, I'm a speaker and I just paid it because I felt bad. Like I was going to be getting all of this value and awesomeness today. And I felt like I should chip in because part of the idea around this event was to have organizers get paid. And so I think that it's very Haute Dokimazo of them to do this event today in this way. And I think it's been super awesome. Okay, so we have time for questions. If anyone has any questions, I see one. Elizabeth says, I saw one today that would allow you to register for free and pay what you think it was worth. Yeah, I've had the MPI San Diego chapter has done that. And I think for some, when you do that, I think it's like anything else. You may end up actually getting more money than you originally, kind of like how HD does with sponsorships. They don't have a sponsorship package and say, give us $3,000 for this. They say, what do you got? What can you give us? And the value comes from what they think, what they're able to give. And I think a lot of times you end up giving more, don't you? Like whenever I go to a free event and it's like, go pay what you can at the door, I know that I end up giving them more than they would have charged me otherwise. So Stan Allen asked, are you finding famous speakers are doing free events, thus making it difficult to sell them as a draw? Have either of you, Liz, have you come into any speaker issues? Or
I haven't. I think that the people who make their living from speaking are still making their living from speaking, and even more so now because they're not getting paid to fly around the world and do it in person. So I haven't seen that personally. Not that it's not happening, but no.
Right. Yeah, I know my friend Brian Fanzo, he had every in-person conference canceled, but he's spoken at like over 50 different conferences now. And so I think some paid, some not. But I mean, corporations are still meeting, that value is still there. A speaker, a keynote speaker deserves to be paid. So someone asked, have any of you had any feedback from sponsors on virtual events and the value that they are finding in them? So that's a good question. We talked about what you're doing on the planning side and encouraging your clients side, but what about the sponsors themselves? Liz, have you had any feedback from sponsors?
Yeah, so I had talked about the event where it was free and we had 2,500 people come and they monetized on the sponsorship side. And so just in terms of feedback, that event was so successful that they hired me and the client to run 5 of their own virtual events globally in 2021. So they not only got enough of a return for sponsoring that event, but they thought, wow, I didn't know we could do all of this. And it's a Fortune 100 company. They could have done it on their own. They didn't have to watch our virtual event first, but sure enough, that's how it happened. They watched it and they said, we want you to do this for us. So not only will they gladly sponsor any other events that our client does, but they are now doing their own. So I don't think you can get a better testimonial than that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Scott, what about you?
I have seen and heard mixed things, and I've even seen and heard of mixed things within the same event. So, and the reason I bring that up that way is that I think the virtual exhibit hall is a tough one. I really do. I think that unless you can do, Megan, some of the matching and things that you talked about, which gets to be expensive, unless you can provide true connection and truly meet we're still going to call them exhibitors and booths, even though they're not exhibitors and booths, until you can meet their goals, it's a tough one, because truly what you're giving them is a digital footprint for the most part, right? You're giving them a web page with some links and some videos and things like that, which has value. But if you are the type of organization that needs to see people and needs to have people touch your stuff and demonstrate your stuff, very challenging to do. But on the other side, allowing your exhibitors and sponsors, usually sponsors more so than exhibitors, to participate as a subject matter expert or participate in important conversations, that I have seen have a lot of value. And then you've also got the logos and things like that, which has value, but people, as I listen to the community talk through about events, everybody says, don't just slap a logo up there. Don't just slap a logo up there. Well, we were doing that in person. And so why are we not going to do that online, right? Don't stop doing it. It's got to be, it's sort of added value almost at this point, or it's a given. It's the lowest common denominator. If you're going to do a sponsorship, you're going to slap a logo somewhere. But what else are you going to add? So there's things that have been working and things that have not been working. I'm still waiting for and you could say an avatar model maybe is the right exhibitor model to go to. I don't even know if that's the panacea. I don't know what it is. I think there is value, and we could have a whole nother conversation about this. Your exhibitors have to give as much as they get. They've got to help drive traffic to those things as well. And then when they get there, depending on the capabilities you give them, they've got to have something that people want to use to connect with them, a reason to submit their information, not just slapping up a video that they created 3 years ago because you told them that they have the ability to put a video up on their webpage.
That's a great point. And I would be remiss if I didn't say SwapCard has AI matchmaking for exhibitors, so that connect attendees to exhibitors and vice versa. But you're right, that it is a two-way street, and you can't just sit in your booth like you used to, wait for people to walk by. I mean, you shouldn't have been doing that to begin with, and you still shouldn't do that when we get back to person. There should be strategy behind that as well. But I know based on my master's, my studies, when I did my thesis, like people are not, they're better about preparing before an event than they are about follow-up. So, but we could do a whole other show on follow-up and lack of such. Lisa Miller asked, what creative ways, and I think this might be our last question, what creative ways have you involved sponsors in virtual events? What's working? So Liz, do you have any other any other examples of anything you've worked on that's creative?
Yeah, so I mentioned the kind of private events. I think one thing to think about is that we are not limited to anything time related. So we hosted an event called the Pivot Summit in June 1st to the 12th. It was 10 days of content for only 2.5 hours per day. You can never do that in person. No one's going to fly to a location and stay for 10 days to only get 2 hours of content. And so I think we need to think about what we can do with our sponsors. We don't have to pack everything into days of a summit, or, Scott mentioned earlier, maybe it's 2 days, maybe it's 5, maybe it's a month. I'm seeing people do things over 3 months, and it's not necessarily the membership model, it's just the idea that you kind of have some flexibility. So we've seen like sponsored yoga sessions, sponsored mixology sessions where you actually mail everyone kits to make it at home, and then you have a mixologist on Zoom or whatever platform and you let them kind of do that. I've seen that. I was talking earlier on a podcast today about the idea that, one of the best things at a trade show is to discover new products. We did a showcase in the summer where it was just 10 products, 10 minutes each product. So it's 5 minutes to present it, 5 minutes for Q&A. You just kind of blow through them. It could be an hour or two, and you get your attendees to watch. That is absolutely sponsorable. So the companies pay to participate in something like that. And they get what they want, which is enough eyeball space. It's more than you would get from people walking by your booth, enough to say, oh, this is interesting, and to click a button and schedule a longer demo or to do something like that. So I think there's a lot of creative things that you can do, but those are just a few of what we've done that I see really work.
Awesome. So I actually was the beneficiary of a unique, awesome sponsor thing today. The Uncorked Corgi donated a gift basket with wine and a bunch of other goodies, and I had it got delivered to me today. So if you look on Instagram, you'll see the videos and pictures of that surprise. Talk about a surprise and delight moment. Like, I think that's the things that we should be striving for our exhibitors and our sponsors both. All right, y'all, that is about it. I really appreciate you, Scott and Liz, taking time out of your day to be with us on Inside Events. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Megan.
All right, and this, for those of you at the event or watching the video, listening to the recording, this will be published on the Inside Events podcast next week. So you can listen back or share it if you miss. I know some people are popping in and out of sessions, right? So some people might have missed the beginning and popped in at the end. Okay, this has been episode 15 of the Inside Events podcast, and we will catch you next time. That's a wrap. Thanks, y'all.